First region, cervical spine. You have flexion, extension. Those are in the sagittal plane. Those are also gliding joint types. You have left lateral flexion, right lateral flexion. Those are in the frontal plane, and they are also gliding joint types. Last, you have left rotation and right rotation, and that is in the transverse plane, and they are pivot joint types. Next is the thoracic lumbar region. You have flexion and extension, and they are in the sagittal plane, and that is gliding planar joints, the joint movement. Then you have left lateral flexion and right lateral flexion. Those are in the frontal plane, and it is also gliding joint types. Last, in the thoracic lumbar region, you have the left rotation and the right rotation. That is in the transverse plane, and that is pivot joint types. Next, going to the shoulder. These are all ball and socket joint type, or the joint type of the shoulder is ball and socket. First, you have flexion and extension. Flexion, extension, and that is in the sagittal plane. Then you have abduction, adduction in the frontal plane. And then you have internal rotation, medial internal rotation, and then you have lateral rotation, external rotation, and both of those are in the transverse plane. And then you have, still in the shoulder region, still ball and socket joint types. The last, or the next two, will be horizontal adduction, horizontal abduction, and those two are in the transverse plane. And then the last one is in the multiplanar plane, circumduction. The next, we'll go to the elbow region. This is hinge joint type. You have flexion and extension of the elbow, and those are both in the sagittal plane. The next is the forearm. Pivot is the joint type. You have pronation and then supination, and both of those are in the transverse plane. Next is the wrist. This is all in the condyloid, ellipsoid joint type. You have flexion and extension, and both of those are in the sagittal plane. And then you have radial deviation and ulnar deviation. Both of those are in the frontal plane. The next is the fingers. You have finger flexion, finger extension. Both of those are in the sagittal plane. And then you have abduction, adduction, and those are in the frontal plane. Now, the hinge is in the small of the finger, and then the big knuckle is the hinge joint type. Okay, the next thing is your thumb. It's multiplanar, and these two movements are the reposition, opposition. This is opposition, reposition. Go up real quick. And this is a saddle or cellar joint type. Okay. And then the next is the hip. These are all, or this is a ball and socket joint type. First, you have flexion and extension. Extension. And both of those are in the sagittal plane. You have abduction and adduction. Both of those are in the frontal plane. And then you have medial rotation, internal rotation, and then lateral rotation, external rotation, and both of those are in the transverse plane. And then, like the shoulder, you have circumduction, and that is a multiplanar movement. The next is the knee. It is a hinge ganglymoid joint type. You have the flexion of the knee, and then you have extension of the knee, having it straight. Both of those are in the sagittal plane. The next is the ankle. You have dorsiflexion and you have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Both of these are in the sagittal plane, and the ankle is a hinge and gliding joint type, but this is a hinge, I would say, joint type movement. Yeah. And then the next is inversion and eversion. So you were going inversion, eversion. I would say that is a gliding joint movement. Inversion, eversion, and they are both in the frontal plane. And then you have pronation and supination. They're both in the multiplanar. Pronation is up and out. Supination is down and in. And then you have your toes, which is the condyloid, ellipsoid joint type, and then hinge / ganglymoid joint type. You have flexion of your toes, extension of your toes that are both in the sagittal plane, and then you have abduction, and then adduction of your toes, and that is in the frontal plane. Okay, the next will be the shoulder girdle, like scapular area. These do not, we don't speak, or we aren't on the planes of these yet. They don't have an individual plane, but you have, and it also joint type, we'll discuss that, save it for later. You have elevation of the shoulders and depression. You have protraction and retraction. And then your mandibular, your jaw, as well as your shoulder. We're not going to go over the joint type or what plane it's in yet. But you have depression, elevation, and then you have protraction, and then retraction from that. And that's it.